Dance Analysis 2 Storm Clouds. What mood are you aiming to create? Describe the skills you use to create this mood. The mood that we're trying to create in Storm Clouds is a sad, empty mood, sort of like like we're all very drained from the strikes. It's the middle of the strikes. Storm clouds happens when the strikes are going on and families are starting to feel the strain and the pressure of having little money and things not progressing as quickly as they'd like. So we're trying to create a sort of strained, sad atmosphere. In order to create this, we use a lot of gestures and facial expressions which show that we are sad and drained. For example, I, as Barbara, quite often look down to the floor, or sometimes I look to the corner of the room as if I'm looking for an answer. But looking down at the floor is a big one. Folding my arms as well, that kind of shows that I'm quite in on myself and I'm not as open as Barbara usually is. So that's a big one. Sighing a lot, slouching my back as if I'm drained and tired. So, were you successful in creating the atmosphere for this scene? Yes, I believe that I was successful in creating the atmosphere for the scene. I believe as an ensemble we were as well. I feel we all used lots of appropriate gestures and facial expressions and tone of voice as well. So that sort of, drained tone of voice as if you've lost the will, lost the energy. I feel that we were able to create a sad atmosphere and build up some tension as well throughout the song, towards the end in particular. What do you need to do to improve your contribution to this mood? I feel like there was a lot of times when I was fidgeting when maybe I should have stood more still, and I feel that fidgeting took away from that mood, especially when certain scenes were going on. I feel I could have frozen more when it wasn't my scene, so that it didn't divert the attention away from the other scenes that were going on, because that can distract, particularly distract the audience, but also can distract other members of the ensemble. And it might take away from that tension and that sad sort of atmosphere. What message does the song send to the audience? How do you enhance the message within the dance? What skills do you use to share this message with the audience? What could you do to improve your contribution to this message? The message that we're trying to send to the audience is that although we appreciate the women of Ford Dagenham for getting equal pay, we're trying to show the audience how difficult it was for them as well. So it wasn't just a case of going on strike and getting equal pay. They had to go through a lot of tough times to get to that, and they had to stay very strong. We're trying to show that these women were very strong women, because they stuck through the strike, even when they were getting no money, when their houses were having things taken away from them because they couldn't afford to pay for them, when it was affecting their families, that their families' jobs. It's to show the audience how strong that these women were and how tough it was for them. I feel we enhance this message by changing our emotions. So we go from sad and lonely and upset, as if we're about to break, to quite strong, particularly towards the end. We all sort of get our strength back and we start opening up more and we start acting more angry and being more snappy and getting that energy back, which kind of shows, I think, the strength of the women that come close to breaking point but then manage to pull it together again. Where does this dance take place? Describe how you should show this in the dance. Describe how this affects your movement. So this dance takes place in different places for all the characters, and we show this by separating the stage into sections. So we have Harold and Barbara, who were in the Houses of Parliament, who were upstage right on the truck, so higher up, and then we've got the strikers that are lower down, sort of centre stage, and then we have Lisa and Hopkins downstage left, and then we have Monty and Thule again on the trucks backstage left, and that sort of separates each person. And obviously we've got lighting as well, and we use freeze frames. So we use a lot of freeze frames within storm clouds to show that we're not all together. So, for example, the strikers freeze when me and Harold are doing our scene, and we freeze, and the strikers freeze when Thule, Lisa and Hopkins are doing their scene. Describe how your character feels within the scene. How do you show this in your movement? For example, how does this affect your facial expressions and dynamics of the movement? So through a lot of storm clouds, my character's quite sad and drained, and I show this by folding my arms, looking down to the floor, hunching my back over, rolling my head back as if I'm, very tired, as if I'm fed up, as if I've lost hope. And then towards the end, in the middle as well, my character goes through moments of feeling quite angry towards the men and towards Harold. And I show that by putting my hands on my hips and scowling and frowning and being more snappy with my singing. For example, when I say, "Don't let the bastard get you down," I'm quite snappy with that. But yeah, so scowling and shaking my head and pointing my finger as well, that shows my anger. Describe 3 points in your dance which are good and explain why they are effective. So one point I think is good is when I say, "Don't let that bastard get you down," because I go from being quite sad and having my arms folded and looking down to the floor to building up this anger, and I start to look up and I start to, scrunch my face together more, and I start pointing and I start putting my hands on my hips and being quite snappy. So it shows that transition from being sad and drained to then realising that you've got to keep it up and got to keep going. And then I get into a more frustrated state. And this again shows a good representation of what the Ford women and what Barbara Castle will have all gone through during the times of these strikes. Another point I think is good is when Thule comes and Barbara has to step down a step. And I peer over, so I put my hands over the top of the truck and peer down. It makes me seem quite isolated, and it makes it seem like the men are quite controlling as well. So I thought that was really effective. And 3, towards the end of the dance, when the music starts to build up and we all have much more anger. So now we're not sad anymore. We're pointing, we've got our hands on our hips, we're frowning, we're scowling, we're singing out to the audience, stamping our feet as well. That shows, I feel that's good because it shows how these characters have developed. So they've stuck through the tough times and they're still fighting, and it shows that. I really like that. I think that's really effective. 8. Target 3 areas of the dance which need improving. For example, timing, facial expressions and dynamics. List and describe these moments you need to work on. So freeze frames, I feel I need to work on these more just because I can be quite fidgety, particularly when we're supposed to be frozen. I feel I can be quite fidgety. And so in order to make it more effective, the story more effective, I need to make sure that I am staying frozen all the time. Not changing how I'm standing too often as well. I feel I go from putting my hands on my hips to folding my arms a bit too frequently. Maybe I could pick certain positions for particular points in the song. So highlight the more sad areas and say, right, I'm going to fold my arms here, and then highlight the more angry areas and say, right, I'm going to put my hands on my hips here. And not reacting too much to what else is happening on stage. So I do feel that I have a tendency to react to other scenes going on, but I need to remember that we're all in our own scenes. So me and Harold aren't with the strikers, we're not with Lisa and Thule, we're all separate, in separate areas, we're not together. We are performing as if we are in separate houses. And I need to remember that, because sometimes I can feel myself reacting to the strikers or reacting to Lisa and Hopkins. I need to make sure I'm not doing that, because we want to represent that all the characters are in different places.